Mirëmëngjes. Good morning.
Good morning, His Honorable Elder Mr. Edi Rama, Mr. Prime Minister of Albania, Mr. Tony Gogo.
Zonja Viviane Reding, ish komisionere evropiane për drejtësinë, të drejtat e njerëzit dhe shtetësinë.
Ms. Viviane Reding, former European Commissioner for Justice and Fundamental Rights. Mrs. Kim Quarles, Deputy Chairwoman of the World Legal Association, ambassadors, academias, and participants from all the various countries. Welcome to the opening session of the World Congress of Tirana. Today we are gathered here at the National Theatre of Opera and Ballet in Tirana for the opening session of the 30th edition of the World Law Congress, which is an extraordinary event that has gathered here more than 300 speakers and 5,000 participants, with delegations from 80 countries to discuss the most current and urgent topics in law and justice under the motto Shaping the New Generation. For Albania, this is a very proud moment and responsibility moment in itself. It is a country that during the last decade has undertaken very deep reforms to strengthen the rule of law and to consolidate the democratic institution and the protection of the fundamental rights. And it is today welcoming one of the most important forums of the world that is dedicated to the rule of law. It is such an honor and a great privilege to have you here in Albania. Dear participants, today Tirana is not simply just the capital of Albania. It has now been turned into a global center of the legal dialogue and the reflection on the future of the rule of law. In this hall, where we have gathered representatives and experts, professionals from all over the world, we see here ideas, experiences, and engagements that are united in serving a universal value, which is the rule of law. Before we open this ceremony, I would like to invite you to watch a brief video to see through the progress of Albania from the fall of the last system towards the path to the joining of the European Union. And the rule of law is not something that is given to you, but it is something that is built upon. Ma fal, po tani këtë video do ta përkthejmë ne?
Jo, se është me përkthim poshtë, është me
Jo,
përkthim
ja.
poshtë.
Për shekuj, në munges të shtetit shoqëria u mbështet tek normat e saj, te zakoni, te fjala e dhënë, një mënyrë për të ruajtur institucionet mungonin. Por drejtësia moderne kërkon më shumë se rend.
The new justice institutions, independence, equality, and in its effort to build a modern state, Albania took a few important steps. But for decades, justice was not an independent power. It was an instrument of the state. This left behind a very difficult situation. The punishment of those who enjoy this is lacking more than any other standards, since we are now understanding that the hand of justice will not stop before anyone, and in front of those who are dressed into the suit of politics or of the justice persons. We have 140 pro. In 2016, Albania undertook a deep reform in justice, which was a very difficult reevaluation process. New institutions were built to guarantee the independence and accountability of the justice system, and it is for the first time that justice began to operate freely. But this reform is not just meant to build just the institutions, but it was meant to change the logics of the system, from the control to accountability, from the influence and to distrust to integrity and trust. And today, justice in Albania is far more independent and far more challenged than ever before. The process is still ongoing, the institutions are still being built up, and everything is moving towards the right direction. But challenges in the rule of law today are far more bigger than ever before. The institutions are being faced with new pressures. And in this interconnected world, no one stands alone. And precisely for this reason, the national experiences have their own very important value. And today, Albania brings its own dialogue and value, which is a dialogue between the justice professionals, because the road does not end with the building of the institutions alone. But our challenge today is far deeper, to make justice tangible for each and every citizen, to make it fair and trustworthy for everyone, because at the end of the day, justice is not being measured by the laws where it's written, but with the trust that is upon which is being built on. And this is not simply the challenge of Albania, but it is the challenge of each society that actually believes in the rule of law itself. Thank you very much. I'd like to give the opening floor to the Honorable Minister of Justice, Mr. Tony Gogu. Minister Gogu, the floor is yours.
Nderuar Kryeministër Edi Rama, I nderuar Ministri I Drejtësisë franceze, Zoti Darmanin.
Mr. Darmanin, welcome, dear President of the World Law Foundation, Mr. Javier Cremades, dear members of the board, dear jurists, servants of the law, and friends of justice. In 3 days, Albania celebrates Justice Day, a date that takes us back to May 10, 1913, when the newly created Albanian state took its first steps in organizing its judicial system. It is not without meaning that one of the first acts of the Albanian state was the organization of justice. From the very beginning, the Albanian state sought to be founded under the rule of law. A century later, faced with its historic mission of joining the European family, Albania undertook its most fundamental justice reform, what is known as the constitutional reform of 2016. And today, in this opening session of the World Law Congress that will take place next year in Tirana, we look back. We look at the history of building our institutions, at the choice to reform justice, even when it seemed impossible. Today, we have chosen to reflect on a decade of transformation, debate, resistance, and expectations. In addition, we choose to look forward toward a world where trust in institutions, the rule of law, and the democracy itself are increasingly being put to the test. That is why today we are not gathered only to recall an Albanian reform. We are gathered to reflect on a question that has now become global. Do democratic societies still have the will to reform themselves? Personally, I do belong to a generation of jurists who were shaped in the years when Albania was striving to build a democratic state and credible institutions. For us, the idea of a European Albania has always been linked to a simple conviction that the law must be stronger than power. 10 years ago, Albania undertook a profound reform of its justice system, a reform approved unanimously by all 140 members of the Albanian parliament, a rare moment of political consensus for justice. It was an extraordinary reform, and in many moments, also a painful one. It was not a technical adjustment. It was a choice to change the relationship between power and law, to move from a system influenced by politics to one that is self-governed through its independent institutions. This transformation did not come by chance. It was built through an inclusive process with Albanian and international expertise and under the rigorous scrutiny of the Venice Commission. In Europe, the rule of law was not built in a single day. Institutions were shaped through crises, reforms, and continuous corrections, from the Magna Carta to the democratic reconstruction of Europe after World War II. Therefore, the German sociologist Max Weber would conclude that trust in the legal order is the foundation of the modern state. But this trust is not given. It is built painstakingly every day, and today the global context makes this even clearer. In recent years, in more than half of the countries in the world, the rule of law indicators have stagnated or deteriorated. Meanwhile, less than 10% of the world's population lives today in full democracies. Therefore, the challenge today is not only to build institutions. The challenge is to preserve trust in them. In this context, Albania is not perfect, but it represents something that today is not common: the determination to reform itself. Even when such reformation has cost, even when it takes time, even when it faces skepticism. And this is not only a political matter. It is also an Albanian public debate, a strong, often exhausting debate between the expectation for quick results and the reality of reforms that require time. The debate is part of the reform process itself, because justice is not built in secrecy. It is built in the eyes of the public and through their trust. In Albanian culture, there exists the concept of besa, the given word that creates an obligation. In a way, the modern state also functions on a greater besa, the belief that the law will be applied equally to all. And perhaps this is the greatest challenge of our time, not only to write good laws, but to preserve society's trust in justice and institutions. This is precisely where the importance of the World Law Congress we will host next year in Tirana lies. As we mark 10 years since the reform, we do not declare a finished success. We reaffirm our conviction that justice cannot be strong without being credible, that independence is insufficient without accountability, and that the rule of law is sustained not only by institutions, but also by citizens' trust in them. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 years ago, Albania undertook a difficult and still unfinished reform. Today, we are clearer than ever about one thing: the rule of law is not built once and for all. For the law to prevail, institutions that correct themselves are needed. Societies must never give up their demand for justice, and political will is required to reform, even when reform seems impossible. In this sense, this Congress is not only a moment of reflection, it is a reminder that the rule of law remains the most difficult task of our democracies, but ultimately the most necessary one. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Gogu. World Jurist Association has been a global champion for the promotion of the rule of law. Now I would like to invite you to see a video clip for the history of this distinguished institution.
Peace through law. During the Cold War years, faced with the threat of a nuclear holocaust, a few good men set in motion a singular initiative in favor of peace. It was July 1957 when, on the occasion of a gala hosted in London in honor of the American Bar Association, its president, Charles Ryan, the Chief Justice of the United States, Earl Warren, and Sir Winston Churchill agreed to create a program to promote world peace through law, the rule of law against the use of force. It's at that moment they decided to launch what would later be called the World Jurist Association. Years later, in 1963, Charles Ryan and Earl Warren, in their tireless struggle for human rights, inaugurated in Greece the first World Congress of Law. Numerous presidents of Supreme and Constitutional Courts from different countries throughout the world, general attorneys, egregious lawyers, and eminent professors, a group of more than 3,000 jurists centered around a single purpose, defined by President Kennedy in his message to the Assembly. It gives me great pleasure to send greetings to the First World Conference on World Peace through the Rule of Law. This conference represents 5 years of effort and brings together lawyers and judges from overseas from 100 countries in the attempt to develop and strengthen the legal machinery that must form the basis for peaceful relations among all nations. 2 years later, Lyndon B. Johnson inaugurated the Second World Congress in Washington, whose organizing committee was chaired by Presidents Truman and Eisenhower. 25 more assemblies of this kind, organized by the World Jurist Association, have taken place since then in various countries worldwide. Thousands of men and women united in this formidable association to promote peace through law throughout the world. In Madrid, within the framework of the 26th World Law Congress, the largest association of jurists in the world, King Felipe VI of Spain is awarded the World Peace and Liberty Award for his defense of democratic and constitutional values that has presided over the 40 years of greater freedom and prosperity throughout the history of his country.
In February 2020, the World Jurist Association and the World Law Foundation, chaired by Javier Cremades, present the World Peace and Liberty Award to U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I would like to first of all acknowledge and celebrate the creation by the World Jurist Association of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Medals.
For the first time, this award, that many consider the Nobel Prize of Law, is not given to a person. The World Jurist Association awards to them the World Peace and Liberty Award as its 2021 World Law Congress. Congratulations, people of Colombia.
For 60 years now, the WJA has worked to strengthen the rule of law around the globe so we can build a peaceful, more inclusive set of societies where the rights of all are respected. I want to thank the World Jurist Association and its chairman, Javier Cremades, for hosting today's program and for the important role the organization plays in our international community.
Andrew Young is a powerful voice of peace.
So I want to thank you for your faith in justice and your willingness to work for peace.
On behalf of the World Jurist Association, welcome again to New York.
What an honor to receive this award on behalf of the European Commission.
Please accept from me, from my colleagues on the court, and from my family, our deepest thanks for this splendid award.
I am deeply humbled to receive this award because there are so many others in this room today who are more deserving than me. Gracias a ustedes por todo lo que han hecho por el Estado de Derecho.
Nos veremos relativamente pronto, en Tirana, en mayo del año 27. Mientras tanto, sigamos trabajando para que cada uno desde su responsabilidad siga siendo una pequeña fuerza a favor del Estado de Derecho y que eso nos permita a todos perseguir unidos nuestros sueños de paz y justicia en libertad. Muchas gracias.
After this presentation of this contribution, I have the honor to ask the President of the World Jurist Association and the World Law Foundation, Dr. Javier Cremades, for his speech. He is going to be accompanied by Madam Viviane Reding, who is the former president of the World Law Foundation, and Madam Kim Corliss, the deputy president of the World Jurist Association. President Cremades, one of the most distinguished figures of the promotion of the rule of law, it is such an honor to welcome you to Tirana. The floor is yours, please.
Prime Minister, Minister of Justice, President of the Supreme Court, Rectors, President of the Bar Association of Tirana, members of the board, Minister of Justice of the Republic of France, my dear Chancellor Aybar, good morning and thank you. We have a short time to share with you what is coming next year. And we want to really make use on a rational way of this opportunity where you, the host country, are preparing yourselves to take advantage of this opportunity. So my idea here is to share with you three ideas. Is why Tirana, why Albania, what is coming, what is happening, and how can you participate, how can you lead and take advantage of this. You saw a video on the history of the World Jurist Association. The founding fathers of this movement had a dangerous world where we had a wall, an iron curtain. On the other side was totalitarianism, and freedom and democracy was on this side. You know that perfectly. You know on what side you were at that time. The world was dangerous, but it was quite simple. People wanted to escape from totalitarianism and reach spaces where liberty and prosperity was achievable. Today, our generation have a more complex situation where it looks like that autocracies are getting functional and democracies are getting tired, are getting dysfunctional. Where autocracy are penetrating democracy, destabilizing, creating confusion, and making impossible to make the system work. So how can we today promote human dignity in their full scale that only the rule of law can provide? There is 3 major cancers that needed to be treated inside democracies. One is access to truth. It's quite difficult today in the digital world to really get the citizens well informed about reality. And without truth, you cannot create freedom. You cannot create rule of law. The judiciary. Yesterday we had a wonderful occasion with the Honoris Causa Ceremony Award to learn a bit more about the role of judges, who are the only one who can speak on the name of the law. Judges are being attacked worldwide in democracy. Citizens are starting to consider judges with the conception that they are politicians with robes, and their authority are really under siege. The third cancer is polarization. We were talking yesterday with Mr. Manzano that sometimes we don't see adversaries, we see enemies, and that's not the spirit of democracy. We share public space, and we try to understand. And understanding is not only rational, it's seeing what is good in your counterpart's proposal. So these 3 sicknesses need to be addressed. And why Tirana? Because why Albania? Because I think that we can learn something from you. You have here in this small country a few things that are quite interesting. You live together different religions, which is one of the hot topics. You, for example, your leader, the Prime Minister, is one of the best friends of my president in my country, Pedro Sanchez, who's the nemesis of Trump, and he's one of the closest friends of Trump as well. Who else? Who other country can take this position of being really a platform? But there is even something more important, and the Minister of Justice highlighted in their speech, which is a passion to the aspiration to become members of the European Union, which is not only an objective of the elites of the country, but it's a shared dream of everybody. And that makes you young, because we were talking yesterday that the European Union is not a club of rich countries. It's not only a market, it's not only a space for citizenship, a joint citizenship. It's mainly a community of law. That's why your efforts of transforming your system into a 100% full integrated democracy and rule of law system is really so fast and so speed. That's what we want to learn, which is the connection between the community and the rule of law and the system. You know that to achieve this goal of becoming a member of the European Union, you need to transform particularly your legal system. And you are doing that, not only with the judicial reform, with a lot of small preparations. So that's why we want all this fatigue, all these tired populations from all democracies who are taking democracy for granted. We want them to connect it with your people, to see that we can still maintain a love relationship with the rule of law system. What is coming? It's coming something unique. You will see that, which has a tangible dimension and intangible dimension. You can compare with the Olympic Games, but of people that are usually under the radar. Chief Justices, professors of law, prominent association of different bar associations. We have today here President of the Mexican Bar Association, President of the Argentinian Buenos Aires Bar Association. You will see hundreds of them. Today we have 100 people coming. We will have 2,000 people coming 1,000 of them will be Albanians, 1,000 of them will be coming from outside. But these 1,000 people are the people who have the responsibility to lead legal institutions, to produce clear norms, clear decisions, to make the rule of law alive day by day, generation by generation. You can compare it with Davos. You can compare with the Nobel Prize. We'll see that. You will see President Mattarella from Italy, which is not just in Italy, but in Europe and in the world, a senior figure who is respected for everybody in the law. He started to be a professor in constitutional law, a judge in the Constitutional Court, and now serving as the president, supported by everybody. So that will probably leave a footprint for generations, because Albania is going to be the capital of law, the worldwide capital of law on those days. So there will be a huge concentration. But there also will be, in Dominican Republic, we put it 8 meters monument to the rule of law in the country. Well, we hope to put it here in a very special place here that will be always remembering that the pillar of living together is not other than rule of law, where human dignity is in the center. Public power is limited by the Constitution, and this Constitution needs to be anthropocentric. Human dignity is the beginning of the German Constitution, and is the center of any constitution. The US Constitution needed to be amended because they forgot it at the beginning. They just wanted independence. But human dignity is the key of a real rule of law state. Every single person. Let me finish with how can you participate? World Law Congresses are not celebrated in countries, are celebrated with the countries. That's why we're doing that. That's why your government is the host today. But we're not supporting the government. We're supporting the country. We're supporting the government. We're supporting the parliament. We're supporting the judges. We're supporting the universities, the institutions. But particularly, we want to highlight what I just said before, is the connection between population and the system. Without this connection, you could have best constitutions, best institutions, best politicians, and the system will not work. You don't know what this is, but we come from countries where people are starting to say, we don't care so much about the system. So, again, today the registration is open. We expect that you put half of the work, and we do half of the work. We take care of the 1,000 people coming from outside, and you take care that everybody in Albania who really is connected with institutions and with the system, particularly new generations, are coming. Let me finish with saying that this is a journey. From Tirana, we will be heading to Berlin in 2029. Berlin will be celebrating 40th anniversary in 29 of the fall of the wall, and 80th anniversary of the German constitutions, of the Grundgesetz, Bonner Grundgesetz. So we will be making this journey, but this stop in Albania will be part of this small community of people worldwide who has as a life purpose to promote human dignity through rule of law. We are not in the best time. We are probably one of the most complicated times, but we have a lot of hope. And part of the hope is to see that you are not just becoming part of this community, but an enthusiastic one who has something to bring in, something to participate. Thank you very much. I just want to introduce you to two of the leaders of this movement. One is Viviane Reding. Viviane is not the first woman who was Minister of Justice, Commissioner of Justice. She's the first Commissioner of Justice of the European Union. And you know her. He has been the face of many debates in the European Union in the last 20 years, digital world, legal reforms, and creating this community of law. She has been serving in the World Law Foundation as vice chairman, and together, here's Viviane, and together with King Quarles. King Quarles was there when I arrived to the World Jurists Association. He's the vice chairman. He lives in New York. Viviane lives in Luxembourg. And both of them has something to say to you today. Thank you very much.
dear Prime Minister, dear Minister, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is an honor and a real pleasure to meet all of you in this fascinating country, Albania, and to meet you in this important moment of time. Important for Albania, because you are in a crucial space of time striving towards the fulfillment of the rule of law requirements indispensable for joining the family of the European Union. Europe is not only built on economic goals, it is mostly a union of values. It has been so since the founding years, when 6 nations decided to get out of the logic of the Second World War and build not on the force, but on the strength of values and of laws. And with the Charter of Fundamental Rights, Europe has made very clear that values are not a decorum, but they are a building block for a fair society at large and for a well-being of each citizen individually. But it is also an important moment in time for all nations of the world, because we experience in this time, in these years, a situation where fundamental rights are under attack. The Global Freedom Assessment concluded that from 137 nations analyzed, 77 cannot bear the name of democracy. In the meantime, an alarming number of states have withdrawn from human rights treaties, risking a top-to-bottom alignment of humanitarian norms and international laws, and eroding the global system of accountability precisely at the moment when authoritarian forces are on the rise. Independence of justice, free media, freedom of academic teaching are seriously under attack, leaving an important part of the world population without the minimum rights and without the indispensable accountability tools. Today's world is not anymore delivering societal improvement naturally, step by step, and we do not have this, what we had during decades, an automatic betterment. We have to fight for it, because very often our world is backpedaling. It is often disrupted by rule-adverse leaders, and it is something overwhelmed by the ultra-rapid pace of technological development. Our responsibility and your responsibility is to react to those rapid changes and show that law, justice, values, respect, freedom, dignity are not only viable basis, they are the only viable basis for a fair and just democratic society. Our responsibility is to present the necessary tools for helping reform pledges to become implemented reforms. And our World Congress will therefore become a rule of law wake-up call worldwide. We will make it happen together.
Faleminderit.
Thank you. President Kremades, Mrs. Reding, and Mrs. Quartz. Now, we are coming to one of the central moments of this opening session. He's been leading Albania throughout one of the most important institutional transformation in Albania, has promoted justice reform, has contributed in strengthening judiciary independence, and has led the country in its path towards European integration. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome now His Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Albania, Mr. Edi Rama. Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours. Honorable Minister of Justice of the Republic of France, Mr. Darmanin, welcome to Tirana. I feel deeply honored to have your assistance, and definitely it's great. And by expressing my gratitude for everything your government, your president has been doing to support the reform process and implementation of the justice reform. We had the pleasure yesterday to support the victory of Paris Saint-Germain, something that we definitely expected with much joy. So, if you want to win the finals, you have to come to Tirana again. Dear Javier, welcome to Tirana. It's an honor, it's a pleasure having you here. These were my words in foreign languages. Now I would like to say some words about this very important moment. Albania becomes the center of a prestigious worldwide event in the field of the rule of law. It's a world governed by law, and power is the mission statement since the association was established in 1963. So this was the mission statement of the World Jurist Association. There have been a lot of geopolitical tensions and pressures, and it was set up as a platform for trust in law and trust of law practitioners. Today, the World Law Congress is a well-known institution worldwide and under the care of the King of Spain, Felipe II, and thanks to the great work of the association, it conveys all around the world the message, the reason that made this association be set up, the message of the world that is governed by the rule of law and not force. And I believe that You wouldn't find a single Albanian that would raise his hand if I questioned, would you have ever imagined some years ago that the World Law Congress would take place in Tirana in 2027? Definitely. Nobody would have ever imagined that Tirana, Albania, would be selected from this prestigious platform as the host country for this Congress. Not for its geographical position, not for the climate or for its hospitality, but for what Albania has done and has been doing, is still doing in this historical challenge. And it has been impossible for many decades for Albanians, for our country, for building in this country, for making the right conditions, for being governed by the rule of law and not force. Thinking about my speech today, I considered to share with you as a moment of reflection. I remembered when we conducted a survey for the vetting process, when we were drafting and working for the justice reform. It is well known that vetting was a key element, a key point at which we trusted. We were the first one to trust in it. And afterwards, we made all the efforts so that all those who greet the vetting as a turning point in the history of justice in Albania to trust it as we did from the very beginning. And here, I mean all our partners, our precious partners in this path. Their support has been of huge importance, first-line importance. And in the survey we conducted at the time, to measure the opinion of public, we received some controversial data at first sight, but they were complementary, in fact. More than 90% of Albanians supported vetting process, the vetting process for the judges and prosecutors. And you know very well, at least the Albanians who are here, that to have more than 90% of Albanians agree in one topic, it's something very rare. Even for the time, I believe that even if we had a secret voting, I believe that not all of us would agree about the time, the exact time. Something else, another question. Do you believe that in your life in Albania, you would see the end of impunity and equality of all people? More than 80% didn't trust in it. So, more than 90% wanted the vetting process and supported the justice reform because they were exhausted from an equal justice, so not all the people were equal. But at the same time, more than 80% didn't believe that they would see this kind of change towards equality before justice. And for the sake of truth, nobody could blame them, all those who didn't trust, because it was not their life, it was not the fact that it was proved in their daily life that justice was an illusion. But this has been the story of Albania since 1912, which proved that justice power was in the hands of the strongest people in politics. Democracy, monarchy, dictatorship, then again freedom with shades of democracy. Despite various movements in the system, something did never change. The sword of justice has been always present in each small and big stadium representing justice. It remained there in the office of the person leading the government. In 2013, we did what nobody had ever dared to do. Nobody has ever imagined to enter the sea we decided to enter on foot, as our quote is. It seemed dramatic for many people, also for those representing political power in majority, to hand over the sword to another force and to create the condition that in such cohabitation circumstances to set up a real power independent on political power. In a book that has been well known, his co-author is Daran Acemoglu, winner of Nobel Prize, Why the Countries Fail. It is given an example, inter alia, of one country divided with the boundaries with the USA and Mexico, the same as a city divided, let's say, between Albania and another neighboring country. The same people, the same tradition, the same customs, and two completely different realities. On one side of the border, everything functions. On the other side of the border, nothing functions. On one side of the border, there are gardens, schools, health services, and generally peace and order. On the other side, all the worst. The same people, because on one side of the border there exists the rule of law, and it is guaranteed by the institution. On the other order is the force, and the balance is affected by the forces that prevail the rule of law. And this is the greatness and the difficulty of our challenge. With this reform that today is written, it's black on the white paper, and it has started to produce tangible results. Meanwhile, it should be guaranteed not by the people, but by the institutions. The institutions are the ones that have to function. They were set up by the reform, and this is a process that cannot be fulfilled within a decade or 2 decades. A decade has already passed, another decade has started, and the process is continuing. In the meantime, what has to be guaranteed is that the process be supported by all those which have the capacities to change its flow, which means by the political power. Definitely, if we approach a huge painting, it is almost impossible to perceive it entirely. But if we approach near the wall, we'll see that there are many things that are not okay there. That's why it's easy to be said than done, but we need to maintain our distance, and we need to look at this picture at a certain distance, and also take into consideration that this painting is continued to be elaborated, to be further painted by various other people. The reason why the challenge is extraordinary and great at the same time in the history of our country is the fact that the establishment, building of institutions is something entirely different from what politics does when it comes to decision-making, representatives, interest groups, stakeholders, to perceive and to do their own actions. At the end of the day, there is a simple truth. People cannot corrupt a system, while the systems, if they are not built based on the institutions guaranteeing the rule of law, they corrupt anyone. I have brought an example, and I am bringing it here again. When discussions were held about the safety belt in Albania, safety belt in traffic was something very difficult to be perceived by Albanians. It was a fact that distinguished Albanians here in our country with the Albanians in Germany. For example, no Albanian in Germany ever perceived to start the car without having been put the safety belt in advance, while a few were the ones who came to Albania and still kept the safety belt. An ambassador from Germany once told me, "It's strange here for you. You Albanians don't perceive, don't learn such a simple thing." And I told him, "Look, you'll feel sorry, but I have seen employees of the German embassy without a safety belt in Albania, and this is true. Because it's not the person, it's not the nationality, it's not the history of his or her own country that determines the behavior of an individual in relation to the law. It's the system." Germans in Albania were quite happy that they didn't have to use the safety belt. While in Germany, they never dared to imagine such a thing. And this is the gap that we have to fulfill with the justice reform and with the building of the new institutions. The setup of a system that makes arbitration impossible, because even to this day, it is everywhere. You can find it everywhere in our state, in our public system, including the justice system, and makes it impossible to reach certain standards, levels with regard to the law. We are in this challenge fully committed, and there will be no way back. We are in this challenge to make this process go on, and here it is something that is a guarantee. It's a huge guarantee for Albania and Albanians. Two words: the European Union. If the European Union wouldn't exist, if Albanians wouldn't love so much to be part of the EU, we would have never managed to build an independent justice system and to determine equality before law. Or we would achieve just what the Afghan people and Iraqi people have achieved after the bombs and after the efforts of Europe and NATO to bring democracy in those countries. The difference between us and them is that we have the European Union and they do not have it in their mind. The European Union is the biggest and the only source for learning how institutions are built, and the entire process of negotiations is the transfer of knowledge from Brussels to Tirana. And such transfer of knowledge is a blessing, because such knowledge cannot be created by a country on its own when it pays the price of a history of a country without institutions, and later on a history where the state and the institutions had never been positioned for creating equality before the law. Therefore, I fully trust that this process will go ahead with all the pains and costs, and I am also fully convinced together with the majority, with the government, not to allow to affect, to damage what has already been designed, and not to allow to have any fluctuations in what has been built so far, with the perspective on an independent justice system. It's not here the place to talk about the complexity of this challenge, but it's important to, and I have now to conclude with the trust that the World Law Congress is a station where we need to go with the aim and a program throughout this coming year, so that in that Congress we have to assure that Albania will not be appreciated for what Albania has done so far only, but it has to use the presence of an extraordinary number of people representing the world of the rule of law in order to have new commitments for tomorrow, for the future. At the same time, I do wish that all our friends who have come here to Tirana, I met some of them and they're here for the first time. I hope that they take this opportunity to enjoy Tirana, to enjoy Albania, and on the other hand, I assure them that we'll be excellent, we'll shine in the organization of the World Law Congress, and we'll do everything that is necessary so that next year we'll have many novelties and further progress achieved in relation to this huge and extraordinary challenge. And at the same time, on this occasion, I'd like to express my respect and acknowledgement to all the representatives of the justice system here in this room, and I assure them that this majority governing the country will always be a sure support for all of them, and I have to ensure them that they will never feel alone in their efforts. On the opposite, they will never be under any kind of pressure, just the pressure of the legitimate requirement of the public to implement the justice reform so that we can achieve, we can arrive quicker, and we are going to be all together. Many thanks. Much respect for me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. We are now going to have a video intervention from the President of the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, Mr. Matthias Gajomar.
Excellencies, distinguished speakers, fellow jurists, on behalf of the European Court of Human Rights, I wish to thank you for giving me a new opportunity to address this opening session of the World Law Congress. Thank you also for welcoming our colleague, Judge Diane Pavley, who is representing the court in person. What can a court do for peace? I asked a similar question recently in a lecture I gave at the University in Kyiv in war-torn Ukraine. Of course, a court of law cannot silence the guns of war, but courts and jurists are anything but powerless in the face of armed conflict. On the wall behind me are the words of René Cassin, former president of our court, one of the architects of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and of the Convention system, recipient of your World Peace and Liberty Award and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. There will be never peace on this planet as long as human rights are violated in any part of the world. His words have been inscribed on the walls of our court to serve as a constant reminder of the purpose of our work and the work of all jurists, to use the language of law as an instrument in the service of peace. That is the very premise on which the World Law Congress is built. Over the past decades, our court has been called upon to examine many situations of armed conflict in Europe. There have been over 30 interstate cases since the European Convention of Human Rights entered into force in 1953. In addition, over the course of its history, the court has received well over 18,000 individual applications concerning armed conflict. Currently, 7,500 such applications are pending before the court and processed by a specialist conflicts unit. The most emblematic example of our court's role in response to armed conflict is its judgment in the interstate cases Ukraine and the Netherlands versus Russia, delivered last year. This historic ruling encapsulates the essence of the court's judicial role. First, in ensuring accountability. Without accountability, there can be no lasting peace. Our court currently remains the only international judicial body holding Russia accountable for violations of the human rights protected by the Convention. Second, in recording truth. Our court's judgments provide a permanent historical record bearing a legal stamp. Third, in defending sovereignty. It shows that the European public order cannot tolerate the forced erasure of the legal identity of a member state. Our court has also helped indemnify victims, for example in Cyprus and in Georgia, and solidify peace, for example in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in Northern Ireland. Our judgments create safeguards so that human rights and fundamental freedoms, the very foundations of justice and peace in the world, according to the Convention's preamble, are not easily undermined. And they convey this important message, that human rights always matter in peacetime and in times of war. I wish to wholeheartedly thank you for hosting this 13th edition of the World Law Congress. It is as necessary and relevant as it was back in 1963. The first World Conference on Peace through Law took place in a world marked by geopolitical tensions and great uncertainty. Today, once again, our world is moving away from the fundamental values and principles of international law. At such a time, we need unity and solidarity of all jurists worldwide. To me, this Congress embodies such unity and solidarity, and a shared commitment to a world governed by law, not by force. In 2027, our court will contribute to the idea of peace through law and the message of the World Law Congress, including by holding a commemorative event on the theme. Today, let me wish you inspiring discussions, and I very much look forward to joining you in person in May next year. Thank you.
Falenderim për Presidentin nga e marë.
Thank you very much to President Gaimar, which is
nga
a
gjykata
very
më e
strong
lartë
support
evropiane për
from the
rrugëtimin e
highest European
Shqipërisë në
court
shtetin e së
for the
drejtës.
path of Albania to the rule of
Tani,
law.
më lejoni
Now,
të hap
I would
panelin e
like
nivelit të
to
lartë,
open the
një
high
nga
level
momentet përcaktuese të
which
këtij
is
sesioni
one
hapës.
of the most
Pesë nga
prominent,
zërat më të shuar në botë për ligjin,
moments
drejtësinë,
we have
ekonominë dhe të drejtat e njeriut do të reflektojnë mbi 10 vjet reforma dhe do të ndajnë vizionin e
people from
tyre
all over the
në
world
rrugën
who are
përpara.
going to,
Paneli do të
give
moderohet nga
us
zonja Elisabeth
the,
Kasin.
various reforms in various countries, and it will be led by Mrs. Kassin.
Ftoj zonjën Kasin
I would like to invite
të
Madam
na bashkohet në
Kassin
panel
to
dhe të
join us here
prezantojë
at the
të
panel
ftuarit në panel.
in order
Ju
for
uroj
her
një
to
diskutim të këndshëm.
present the participants of the panel. Good luck.
Good morning. Welcome to you all. My name is Elisabeth Kassin, and I'm proud to be a trustee and board member of the World Law Foundation. So today we have this distinguished panel. Now it's working. Yes. So our distinguished panel today are, I will start by Darian Pavli, one of the judges of the European Court of Human Rights, elected in respect of Albania in 2019. Teresa Rodriguez de las Heras, President of European Law Institution and Professor of Commercial Law in Madrid. Simon Sheestreet, Professor of Law and President of International Association of Judicial Independence and World Peace. Buwan Ribu, good morning, lawyer and activist and child advocate granted of the Medal of Honor by the World Law Foundation. And to my left, Ricardo Osman, founder and director of Growth Lab at Harvard's Center for International Development. And I think we need to congratulate Ricardo because yesterday he has been a doctor of honoris causa here in Tirana of Albania. Okay? So, please. I will ask each panelist to make a short presentation of around 5 minutes. Sorry, because the time is really a little time. And after, if you have any question, please go ahead. Our discussion will examine Albania as a case study for institutional transformation, reflecting the transition from a communist regime to a democratic system, knowing the door to the European Union. So I would like to turn firstly to Professor Simon to give his perspective on the achievements and a challenge ahead and how the institution could be assistance. Simon, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to thank the organizers for making this panel possible to discuss from an academic and professional point of view. It is my honor to speak at this World Law Congress in Albania, organized by the World Jurist Association, and together, of course, in cooperation with the government. I would like to just say one personal note that I am moved to be in a country that in the Second World War, the Jewish population increased from 200 to 2,000 when all the other Jewish populations in other countries were destroyed. So I would say to you, Fale Minderit. And this is relevant to what we say of the rule of law values, of justice and peace and human commitment. What is important to say, it has already been referred to a number of times, that Albania is enhancing democracy in the background of global challenge to the rule of law. Over the past decade, we have already heard it, we have witnessed a profound transformation in the global democratic landscape. What once appeared to be a steady expansion of liberal democracy has given way to a troubling pattern of democratic backsliding. Yet, this regression does not arrive with tanks in the streets or abrupt collapse of constitution. Instead, it comes quietly, gradually, and under the cloak of legality. Elected governments, in fact, are enjoying genuine democratic mandate, and they rely on the will of the people in the ballots once in 4 years and say, now we have the right to do anything we wish. And this, we have seen it in Hungary and Poland, and fortunately it now reversed in those countries, but the global term, the global pattern has not changed. In this backsliding of democracy, Albania has stood out by undertaking one of the most ambitious reform processes in Europe, characterized by a sweeping transformation of its legal and political landscape. While the centerpiece of this transformation is the judicial overhaul, launched in 2016, and we saw this clear commitment by the Minister of Justice and more emphatically by the Prime Minister, the reforms extend far beyond the judiciary and address systematic deficits in governance, in political improprieties, in corruption that have historically plagued this country. This transition reflects a shift toward a culture oriented around the values of probity, sense of duty, and the rule of law. By amending roughly 1/3 of the Constitution, enhancing over 25, enacting 25 organic laws, Albania has sought to align its institutions with the European Union standards to eradicate corruption that threatened to destroy the judicial and political systems in this country. Now, when we talk about assessing what has been done, we have to come to the issue with modesty. We are not coming to say from a paternalistic point of view, but just to share what has been done in the past years. I have to say that I was spending many hours reading all the reports, particularly of the EU, and there have been 2 reports in the last year, one in July on the rule of law, which covers not only the integration countries, but also the member states, and the other one specifically devoted to Albania, which is called the working document on Albania, which is very specific. And I have to say that these 2 reports are generally favorable. It is according to certain stages that the European Union, which is very bureaucratic, meticulous system of rating, it has rated the progress as moderate, that Albania is moderately prepared for the continuous process of accession, and in many areas it has made good progress. In some areas it made some progress, but overall what you see in these reports, that it has been very clear that the commitment of the Albanian society and the political leadership is very clear, not only to deal specifically with the various areas like justice and security and economy and so on, but also to create a culture of good governance, and this is part of what we wrote in the ELI, Mount Scopus European Judicial Standards of Judicial Independence, where we emphasize that every state in Europe must strive to create a culture of judicial independence and a culture of the rule of law, because it's not only the judges, it is the whole system, the political leadership, the legal professionals, the economic and business leaders have to work together to create this type of culture. I can say that it is clear that this country aspires to create a culture of the rule of law and to implement all the justice reforms that have been legislated 10 years ago. And I only, in the last point, want to say that when you introduce independent judiciary, impartial judiciary, very effective, efficient judiciary, you also help not only the domestic system for the rule of law and human rights, etc., but you also create respect in the international arena for judgments to be enforced, judgments that are issued here to be enforced, and investments to be attracted. And now I see that Ricardo is smiling, because I'm sure he would agree with me that investments are very important for economic development, international development. We heard so much yesterday from the Prime Minister about how important he considers this issue. And therefore, it is not just for lawyers, it is for the whole community to make sure that Albania will transmit and broadcast a message that it is committed to development, committed to international trade, commitment to cross-country cooperation, and that anyone who comes to invest in this country will feel comfortable in the court. And one last point is that there are problems. You know, it is not so easy to lose almost 40% of the 805 judges and prosecutors because they have been vetted. It's called vetting. In Albania, in Ukraine, it's called lustration. In Poland, they have this green and yellow and red system how to decide who stays and who leaves. And so there is a problem of efficiency and, of course, on digitization. I will not mention all the suggestions that were made by the two reports that I was just, but I wish you really great success in this dramatic change that you took. And thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you. Thank you very much for this stimulating contribution, which is really rich in ideas. So now I would like to turn to Darian Pavli. Please give us your perspective as an Albanian and European on the progress and unresolved challenge of human rights, judicial independence, and the transition to democracy. I understand that Darian would like to speak Albanian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the invitation to this important event for the justice system in my country.
Hello, thank you very much. It is such a great pleasure for me to be here, to all the organizers. I thought that in these few minutes to concentrate my speech on a few aspects as to how the jurisprudence of the European courts has dealt with cases coming from Albania, how has the approach of the court been related to the reform that has been undertaken in the last few years? So there is no need for me to go there because this reform has been quite deep and quite wide, especially in certain aspects. I would speak in relation to 3 or 4 topics in order to respect the time. First of all, I would like to talk about the vetting process, not only because it was one of the key components of the reform, but because it related to the largest group of the cases that came against Albania to the court. It is a total, this moment, of 180 cases, out of which 100 cases have already been processed by the court as to date, as to the moment that we are speaking. And the leading judgment of the court dealt with the fact that the general architecture of this process that was very extraordinary at the European level was actually in line with the Convention on Article 6 of having legal security, legal assurance, and a private life. Please allow me to give a little citation from the judgment of the court in relation to the legitimacy of the decision. It is important to emphasize that the aim of the vetting law was to guarantee the functioning of the rule of law, the true independence of the system, and the return of the public trust into the institutions of the justice. It is also given an opinion by the Venice Commission. This was not only necessary, but justified as a move to move forward, because if it was left unaddressed, it could have destroyed the whole justice system. Based on these circumstances, the ECHR reached the conclusion that, as I said, very generally, this was as a process accepted. The court has, however, found a few procedural errors in 2 or 3 cases specifically. The second group is related to a few issues that deal with the constitutional architecture at the level of decision taken by some of the highest courts in the land. Sometimes we have had some very sensitive issues that were treated by the Constitutional Court. I do not wish to sound very technical. However, I need to separate 2 of them that are related to the Constitutional Court decision, the splitting of the equal voting, and that in our system you need a majority or a supermajority of 5 judges of the Constitutional Court in order to have a constitutional case. Very generally speaking, the ECHR has found that this mechanism, or these kinds of mechanisms of the Constitutional Court, are in line with the convention, but it has placed the attention into a few provisions where the votes are split equally. It is necessary to have the reasoning of the majority, for instance, where the majority has voted against the constitutional violation, and this has to be specifically written down in the judgment and reasoned, therefore. Therefore, the issues where the Constitutional Court has been operating for a long time with not full membership, like with less, for instance, than 9 members. And that is why this would play a role in the decisions and the judgments that are handed out by the court. But of course, this is related to the issues of filling the vacancies. Very briefly, I would like to state a case that we have dealt with, the Cocodima case, which related to the assets, patrimonial assets, and the MPs in Albania, and the system in its whole architecture was actually found to be in line with the convention. I would like to talk a little bit about the challenges for the future. First of all, I would like to refer to two cases with a historical and traumatic background. They are cases that relate to the loss of life. One of the cases is related to the death of one of the protesters on the protest of the 21st of March, and the Durdai case that is related to the loss of life in an explosion in the Grdec village. And both of these cases were found as violations by the Albanian authorities to carry out an efficient investigation, and the court has referred to the case that these cases are actually still ongoing by giving the authorities more time. At the end, I would like to refer to a group of cases that are related to what can be considered a little bit more prosaic, but they can be the essence of the functioning of the justice system in every country, such as the delays in relation to the various court cases of every kind. I can refer, for instance, if I am not wrongly citing the Minister of Justice, Mr. Gogol, who reflected in the media a few days ago that the system, and we are not going to be judged by the papers that we produce, but by the quality of the services that we produce. Lately, there have been two decisions of the ECHR. In the latest decision, Shopaka, the court noticed a decrease in the backlog at the High Court, where there has been a considerable progress, and we have a considerable number of cases in the courts of appeal, and the timeline to treat these cases and to adjudicate them is actually quite long. And the court has called upon the Albanian authorities, and I quote from the decision, that especially to the legislative power, to undertake the right measures to complete the vacancies, and also the human resources authorities to fill the vacancies, because I think this is one of the challenges that we have to be faced with in the next decade. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darian. Clearly, you have done an enormous amount of work, but there is still a fair way to go. So whilst our focus is on Albania's position in Europe, Albania is also facing both economic and commercial challenge, and also challenge arising from technology in today's world. So I would like to invite Teresa Rodriguez to give her view on this, please. Teresa.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, distinguished authorities, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. As in my capacity of the President of the European Law Institute, I feel particularly honored to have the opportunity to share with you some reflection from the perspective of the Albania as a country, but definitely there are the challenges and the problems that we have around the world. We certainly live in uncertain times, and we have a shared, genuine, common feeling that our legal systems, our democracies are undermining their resilience. Why is that? Where this feeling is coming from? My perspective is that we are living in an age of fragility. Why fragility? Because indeed the law and democracies and legal system and judicial system, they need to face today three interconnected fragilities. First, the fragility of the planet. We have the problem of how to guarantee sustainability of our society and our world in the future. Second, the fragility of human beings. Human beings exposed to two kinds of vulnerabilities. On the one hand, the vulnerability of living in a natural environment that is under threat, but second, and probably more silent and less visible, the existential fear, the existential threat coming from our artificial ecosystem. In particular, this feeling that the progress on artificial intelligence is indeed compromising the sense of being human beings. But we also have a third fragility, the fragility of the law itself. This curse of the law fragility. And why is that? Because the law, and therefore the legal system, need to strike a balance between being robust, but at the same time flexible enough to be close to the reality, to be sound, but at the same time adaptable. And at the very, very end, to be clear, to be predictable, but also to be enforced. To be enforced in a way that is fair, but is also persuasive and dissuasive. So the law, and therefore our legal system, all of them, we need to face these three fragilities. And all of them are interconnected. And probably one of them, the fragility related to artificial intelligence, is the one that is raising more passion, but also a feeling of misunderstanding. And let me explain why I believe that artificial intelligence is definitely one of the biggest challenges that we need to face. First, and this is definitely very obvious, because artificial intelligence economy is dramatically and radically changing our economic model. We need to think, what do we want to have in the future in relation to our economy model? There are utopian scenarios, these ideas that human beings are going to be freed and relaxed from the burden of labor and work. But on the other hand, there are also this fear of some dystopian scenarios when humans are deprived from those who is indeed our way of feel that we are alive. So the economic model is not simply about money, productivity, not even prosperity. If how we want to rethink our idea of economy as how we live in community, how we interact each other. So this is the first and probably the most obvious impact of artificial intelligence. The second one is how artificial intelligence is redistributing power in the international order. Now we have a tension, sometimes an alliance that we don't want to have, between some political power, social power, and economic power. And many of the fears and concern that we associate to the technology itself is not about technology. It's about the power model that is underpinning and underlying the development of artificial intelligence. So we can change that. We can fight against, and we can create a common model, a social model of artificial intelligence. Let me just go to the next and last perspective of why artificial intelligence is so disruptive. Because artificial intelligence is challenging a human-centric cosmovision. Everything, and in particular the legal system, has been conceived, developed, and designed to be human-centric. Everything. Creativity, consent, fault, decision-making, and justice. We believe in a human-centric justice for human. And now we know, and this is essentially my work, we know that artificial intelligence is not only mechanizing and automating many activities, it's also automating decision-making, including dispute resolution. This is probably the biggest challenge that humankind has faced during history. To which extent we want to share human decision-making and justice with this new, extraordinary, fascinating development of the new technology, artificial intelligence. My last question is, are we accepting and are we driving towards what I like to call AI-human hybrid society? Is hybridization the kind of interaction that we want to have between technology and human? Is hybridization to lose humanity, or on the contrary, to humanize technology? What do we need to do? Let me just conclude from the perspective of the European Law Institute. We need to work together on consensus-driven, a stakeholder-based, common, harmonized legal framework that has to be global, has to be based on this idea that artificial intelligence is definitely a common challenge, because indeed, all of us, we are facing the same fragility. The fragility of the planet, the fragility of human beings, and the fragility of the law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. I think you give to the room a big challenge to answer to your question about intelligence artificial. I think we need more time to answer. Thank you. So I would like now to give the floor to Ricardo Osman, and I would like that Ricardo give us his perspective on the relationship between the rule of law and the economic challenge in Albania. Ricardo, please.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Albania for what has been for me 13 years of love affair with the country. I was very excited to get involved in Albania because I saw it as a country that had been destroyed by a horrible political system trying to recover itself. I come from Venezuela, a country that was destroyed by a horrible political system, still not able to start recovering itself. So I see in Albania makes me hopeful about Venezuela because it shows to me that there is a possibility to recover after a horrible experience. So thank you, Albania, for what you've taught me. Thank you also, the World Jurist Association, for inviting me. I would like to make the connection between rule of law and the economy. And you see, rule of law is in everything, and I really love the Prime Minister's reference to seatbelts and people using or not using seatbelts. But the economy also is based on people following some rules. The interesting thing about rule of law is that it's not the ability of the government to create rules that are forced on the population. It's sort of the ability of the population to adopt rules that it imposes on itself and especially on the government. And if the government doesn't follow the rules, if it's not a government of laws, but a government of people, a government of expression of power, then amazing things start happening in a bad way. When I came to Tirana for the first time in August 2013, I had to do an assessment of the country, of the economy. And I found that there was a huge fiscal deficit that had not been authorized by anybody. It was about 7% of GDP. In those days, the government had almost no access to finance because it was not seen as trustworthy. So, in addition, the deficit had not been authorized, so the government was simply funding the deficit by not paying, by running arrears. And these arrears were run with government contractors that had borrowed money from banks, and they were not paying the banks. So the banks were accumulating non-performing loans because the government didn't pay them. And obviously, the market's expectation was that the central bank was going to have to go in and print money to cover the deficit. So people thought that the currency, the lek, was going to be attacked. So people wanted out. So you see, the government stops working, the currency stops working, the banks stop working when the governments don't follow certain rules. And so, in addition, people were finding it very inconvenient to have to pay their electricity bills. And as a consequence, there was a financial crisis in the electricity company that was unable to sustain the production of electricity. And as a consequence, I thought there could be an electricity crisis. So I told the Prime Minister, I think you face 4 potential crises. You face a fiscal debt crisis, you face a potential banking crisis, you face a potential currency crisis, and you face a potential electricity crisis. If you fix this problem, no one will thank you for it because they never saw the crisis. But if you don't fix them, they will remember you and blame you for the crisis. So interestingly, I have to report to you that the country adopted some rules to bring discipline to the budget. And right now, the debt to GDP ratio is on a downward trend. It reached, because of the assistance in COVID, to 75% of GDP. It's down to 63% of GDP. I think it beats any European Union member country. They have a lower debt than any of them. The currency is strengthening. I have had calls from the Prime Minister saying, I have a crisis, the lek is becoming stronger. I said, you know, that is the pain of victory. The electricity, instead of becoming a source of problems, has become a source of growth and a source of attraction of foreign investment in generation. In fact, in order to convince Albanians that it was important to pay the electricity bill, we had to give the sense that it was a crime not to pay your electricity bill, and not paying your electricity bill was a way of stealing the education budget, stealing the health budget, stealing the infrastructure budget, and that was not fine not to pay the electricity bill. And that in those days, the IMF wanted to impose on the government an increase in electricity prices to lower the deficit of the electricity company. And the Prime Minister correctly said, I'm not going to increase the prices that are paid by the good Albanians so that they can fund the bad Albanians, right? We have to convince people that we have to protect the good Albanians from bad behavior. And interestingly, that policy not only fixed the financial problem of the electricity company, I thought it would come at a political cost, but actually it was one of the most popular policies because people thought that it was not okay for others to steal money from them. So I think Albania has had enormous, tangible economic benefits from a system of rule of law where the rule binds on the government and the government can operate more effectively. So I think that's a very important lesson from Albania to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you for giving us this relationship between rule of law and economies, which are really concrete, and the benefits are on the country. So now I would like to turn now to Biwan Ribu to recount his own particular experience as an activist and advocate for exploited and abused children, and in particular, what lessons can be drawn for Albania, please.
Good morning, honorable dignitaries and ministers, my fellow panelists, respected brothers and sisters who are all here as distinguished champions of and champions for justice. My dear friend and brother, Javier, the Board of Trustees of World Jurist Association, as was just said a minute ago, the lesson from Albania to the world. I would like to begin with my sincere thanks and gratitude as an Indian to the people of Albania who gave not only in Sister, Mother, and Saint Teresa a humanitarian, a beacon of light, but also a symbol of love, of justice, and of service to the entire world. Thank you. What Mother Teresa, what Saint Teresa taught us was another kind of force, the force of love. And today, as all of us gather here together to strengthen the rule of law, we must remember that they are both the same truth, just acknowledged and spoken about in different words. The force of love and the force of law. They must work and work together to strengthen civilization and humanity. What is the rule of law? I asked last year at the World Law Congress to my 11-year-old son. And he replied that it is the force, or it is the distinguishing factor between good and evil. It is the difference between good and evil. So the rule of law is not only about crime or punishment. It is the solemnous promises that we have made to ourselves as a society or as a civilization, to our fellow human beings. It is how we ensure access to education. It is how we ensure access to employment. It is how we ensure access to services. It is how we ensure access to health. It is how we ensure access to dignity. And life with dignity is the fundamental right and promise of the rule of law. I am here to also talk about my experiences in the protection of children. And when a child becomes a victim of a crime, especially a sexual crime, that is a trauma that the child carries forever. That is an evil. When it is perpetrated, it perpetuates forever. And a child who is unsafe in one part of the world is a threat to the rule of law and the rule of justice everywhere in the world. With the idea that if we fail to protect our children today, nothing else we do matters tomorrow, I would like to share with you what we have been able to achieve for the protection of children working together, especially in the last year where the World Law Congress, one of the oldest, one of the most respected, one of the most far-reaching and powerful institutions in the world, the most respected institution in the world, gave its support and lent its weight behind the cause of the protection of children and launched Jurists for Children worldwide. We thought that the rule of law should transcend from being an ideal or a philosophy or things that is being spoken about in courtrooms or in conferences, the rule of law must reach the people, the most vulnerable people, and it should become everybody's collective, conscious and behavioral change issue. And we picked up one specific thing as Jurists for Children Worldwide, an initiative of the World Jurist Association and the Just Rights for Children. We said that we are going to rid the world of child marriage. Child marriage, as an example that we took, was a crisis of health. It was a crisis of education. It was a crisis of protection. It was a crisis of economy. It was a crisis of fear. And it was a crisis of unjust laws and practices that allowed for our children to be raped in the name of marriage, to be abused in the name of marriage, with no recourses to laws. And we started on the ground by protecting or saving or prohibiting child marriages from taking place. We started with the idea that the law must reach the child, and with innovative things like taking injunctions for the first time, calling up the police when a child was getting married, working with the governments in many countries and working to create laws that make, or they call, child marriage for what it truly is, child rape, and make it a criminal justice issue. We, as Jurists for Children Worldwide, took this message across the globe. Across 99 countries, I would like to share with you, in 1 year, the message that we started with in the Dominican Republic. In 1 year, we have been able to take it to 99 countries. We have been able to physically stop over 200,000 child marriages from taking place. We have been able to rescue, with the enforcement of the rule of law, over 60,000 children in the last 1 year alone. And this, my dear friends and colleagues, has been possible only due to the efforts of people such as yourselves. People who chose not to remain silent. People who said, wherever we might be a businessman, we might come from the government, we might be a lawyer, we might be a professor, we might be working on issues of artificial intelligence or on economy, we might be working on health, but we will do whatever is possible in our lives to work for the protection of children. And when the UN feared that it would take 300 years to end the scourge of child marriage, with over 12 million child marriages taking place every year in the world, that is 12 million children being raped, 12 million children not finding access to the rule of law, 12 million girls who cannot participate in the economic workforces of nations, and their families, and who remain a burden on societies. When the UN feared it would take 300 years, we embarked upon this journey, and I am pleased to share with you that in the last 1 year alone, we have been able to reduce in India the prevalence rate of child marriage from 24% to less than 15%, and together we will save and protect all these children within the next 5 years. Within this generation, the rule of law will reach out to every child and make child marriage history. It started in one such World Law Congress. We are here today to reiterate that promise that we made to ourselves a year ago. And we are here to reiterate that promise that the rule of law must reach every country, every state, every city, every village, every household. One of our colleagues yesterday had said in his acceptance speech, he had said that the best teachers make people love what they teach. The best teachers make people or make students fall in love with what they are teaching. That is our biggest goal. That should be our biggest ambition. We, the people who understand laws, we, the people who understand the value of justice, we, the people who have taken it upon ourselves to uphold this value, we must take this value to the last person, the most vulnerable, the last child, and we must ensure that the rule of law belongs to the people, not only in terms of understanding, not only in terms of respecting, but we create a society where people love the laws. And when, thank you, that is something that appealed to you apparently. It took, that is, it's a play of words that I thought to myself. In law, we trust, but we also hold the law in trust for our children. And that is a weight, that is a responsibility that all of us also carry. When people, when children, they uphold justice, when they uphold laws, when they are protected through laws, that is the time when, my dear friends and brothers and sisters, when children grow up to respect laws. And when children grow up to respect laws, that is the time when we were discussing in the panel earlier, that is consciousness change and behavior change. The behavior change of culture will come from what we practice every day, what we choose to do every day. And that is the society that we intend to build. We did not inherit this world, as I was saying, only for ourselves. We also inherited for our children. And the rule of law and the commitment to justice must be practiced like religion and must be universalized. Universalized as a value of life. Universalized as we have globalized economies. Universalized so that it reaches everyone and all. And legal justice, not only social justice, not only economic justice, but legal justice for everyone is a birthright, and we must pledge that together we shall have it. For us, through strengthening policies, through strengthening institutions, through building capacity, through making knowledge accessible to all, through getting communities together, through use of technology to reach or enable justice or access to justice. In the next 1 year, when we come back to Albania, we must promise to ourselves that we will be the last generation that sees unjust laws, lack of laws, non-enforcement of laws. As the Honorable Prime Minister was saying earlier and giving an example of wearing seat belts. People will respect laws when they also fear laws. I talked about the love for laws. I am also talking about the respect and the fear for laws. Prevention of crime is the biggest challenge. It is the biggest goal, the target for all of us, for all justice delivery systems. But prevention must be accompanied by protection. Protection must be accompanied by prosecution. And the goal of prosecution must also be to prevent, so that life comes a full circle. With that idea, with that philosophy, with that goal, that there is no bigger threat in society than, or no bigger injustice in society than what is perpetuated through an unjust law. We resolve here to come back to the World Law Congress with a renewed commitment of making at least one issue, one injustice in the world history, and we are well on our way to protecting all children worldwide through the efforts. I would like to invite all of you to join hands with us. I would like to invite all of you to join in the spirit of service and the spirit of justice which has been well initiated by Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa, and which is the spirit that resides within all of us. Thank you all very much, and thank you once again to the people of Albania for your warm welcome. I hope to see you next year with Albania being well on its way to being the champion of law, the champion of justice. Thank you.
I'm really sorry because in terms of timing, we do not have time to have questions from the room. But in any case, next year we will be there, so you will have time for 1 year to think about your question to this panelist. As you can see from this morning discussion, we went from the culture of law to economic challenge to concrete examples to the child example, as well as one of the challenge for all the community, especially for the lawyers here, is the intelligence artificial. And I think this morning has been a great, great discussion. There is a lot of open questions. So next year, we will be there and we will try to answer to all their questions. Thank you, my distinguished panelists. Thank you to be there, and thank you all.
I'd like to thank the 5 panel speakers. Now I'd like to invite you to watch this video clip about the World Law Foundation.
Ustedes están manteniendo viva esa llama. Sigan formando las nuevas generaciones para que mantengan ese espíritu de concordia y de colaboración, de competencia y pluralismo.
The World Law Congress doesn't come to an end yet. In order to share the vision about the World Law Congress 2027, now I would like to invite Ángela Montoya, together with the chair of the Constitutional Court, the members of the board, and the rectors of the universities.
Thank you all. I would like to call the board members of the World Law Foundation to accompany me. Everybody's coming, yeah? Thank you. Dear Minister Tony Gogu, dear friends, we are living in difficult times in a world that not so long ago was walking firmly towards stronger institutions, deeper democratic roots, and the rule of law that was gaining ground across borders. Today, it would appear that the path is bending in the opposite direction. And it is precisely for this reason that the World Jurist Association and the World Law Foundation chose Albania as the host country of the World Law Congress 2027. Because Albania today embodies the very fight for the rule of law that the world cannot afford to lose. Up to this point of the ceremony, you may be wondering what this three-day Congress in 2027 will actually look like. So allow me very clearly to share a glimpse with you, because today is the kickoff of something that is going to be truly extraordinary. And when I say extraordinary, I mean it. Among the figures expected to join us is His Majesty King Felipe VI of Spain, Sergio Mattarella, President of the Italian Republic, Stephen Harper, President of the Federal Constitutional Court of Germany, and Matthias Gullmeier, President of the European Court of Human Rights. And as our previous editions, we will once again host the Constitutionalism and Environment Forum, where we'll continue to welcome distinguished voices, such as Luca Messetti, Matthew DeSant, Antonio Benjamin, Brian Preston, and a lot of leaders to continue to inspire and shape the global conversation. But beyond every name on this stage, our deepest ambition is this. We want to put Albania in the top of the minds of the world, because we do this Congress, as Javier Cremades was saying, not in a country, but with the country. We do not do it in the country, but with it. And tonight, and today, it's not the night, as the Prime Minister, Edi Rama, who from the very first moment saw the potential, he understood before anyone else what this Congress could mean for Albania and for the world. It has the name of his team, exceptional professionals who are giving this project everything. And it has the name of the World Jurist Association family, who have been there since day one with Javier, shoulder to shoulder, through every challenge, every milestone, and every achievement. We know what we the country can achieve because we have lived it before. The Dominican Republic was our most recent Congress, and it was a tremendous success. The success of an entire country opening its arms to the rule of law and making it its own. And today, the person who made this possible is here with us, Jose Alejandro Aybar. Thank you, Jose Alejandro. Tonight in Tirana, that journey continues. The road to the World Law Congress 2027 officially begins. Thank you all. And here, the board members and directors of the universities are with us. So this is a kickoff. Congratulations, Albania.
Ndërsa po i afrohemi
While we are approaching the conclusion of this opening session, now I'd like to invite all of you to enjoy a cultural session which clearly shows the spirit, the culture of Albania. please, the microphone. We can't hear anything. We didn't hear anything, no mic.